Hello, awesome people! I hope you're having a great day today. Today we're taking a look at J.R.R. Tolkien's Beren and Lúthien. It's a story set in the First Age, which has been told in a few different places. We get a short version of it in The Lord of the Rings, where we talk about Arwen having Lúthien's choice because of the love that she has for Aragorn, and following in Lúthien's path, we find out about some other things, like it's also mentioned and some of the other places in the legendarium, like the Silmarillion and stuff. So we find out more and more about that. And this, I thought, was going to be the story that told sort of a deeper dive then into it. For example, in the Chronicles of Dragonlance Chronicles, there is, in the first trilogy, they talk about the Legend of Huma. And you hear a song about the Legend of Huma, as that actually exists. And they've told the tale of the heroics of Huma, and then we actually have a novel called The Legend of Huma that actually tells that story. That's sort of a prequel, if you will. I thought that's what this would be happening. Just like some of the other stories in this collection that we've been doing a deep dive for. For example, I just reviewed The Children of Hurin, which is set in the First Age, which also tells a story that had been told previously, and then is now a bigger sort of a book that was developed into it. Well, in this case, what we're getting instead are multiple tellings of this story by Tolkien. Some by poetry a few times, some by prose a few times. So we're getting told the same story over and over and over again in smaller bite-sized chunks. And in each of them, his son, Christopher Tolkien, is editing it and telling us what what fragments are out there, what this says, what's the context of it, and that sort of a thing. So it reads less like just one big giant story, and instead it reads like the same story told 6 or 7 times over the course of this 255 page book. So it's not a novel; it's just a collection of stories that tell the same story over and over and over again, from different ideas, from different concepts, with different names, different histories, and so forth. Tolkien's Legendarium, as a reminder, was a living history. He didn't just write it and then set it and move on. For example, in his first book that was set in the world of Middle-earth, The Hobbit, he has a ring that is riddled between two main characters or protagonists, and the Hobbit, and then Gollum, an antagonist. And he gets the ring as a result. He found it, and he actually wins the riddle game and gets to live. So he finds the ring. Then and that's it. That's the first book. And then later on, when he was writing Lord of the Rings, he was like, "This is the One Ring," and he decided to make that the One Ring. But he didn't feel like the way that he had written it in The Hobbit read like it. So he went back and he edited it. And he actually went back and he edited it, and now The Hobbit that you read has edited the riddling game, the chapter where he finds the ring, and the ring is sort of kind of not seen as a major issue with Gollum, and so he sort of edits it. And I actually read and reviewed the first edition for you. So he did that, for example, with his own key stuff, The Lord of the Rings and The Hobbit. This was a living thing, right? Names change, characters, concepts change, and so forth. So what this does is it tells the tragic story of Beren and Lúthien, and then the choice that is made. So I want to keep my reviews typically spoiler free, but this one, it feels like it has. If you've read any of the Legendarium, then you're familiar with the key plot points of this story. And the story doesn't build on them in any major ways, right? So all you're doing is going back and sort of seeing the different ways that Tolkien approached this. It reminds me of something that I did when I was in college. I took a summer guided reading course for the Middle East on any topic that I wanted to from a history professor, and I wanted to do a deeper dive into the 6 Days War, which I'd heard some things about, but never actually read or done any sort of sort of academic reading on. So I read journals and diaries and these first-hand accounts and historical works with various signs and different contexts that happened. And then I read some of those various things. So I read all these different accounts of the 6 Days War, and then I wrote my final research paper about what I had found out, right? And that was the class, a summer guided reading project. And this reminds me of that sort of a thing, right? You're reading the same, massively mythic story arc of this tragedy, but you're reading it from multiple different angles, different takes, different ways. One's a journal, one's a In my book, one was a journal and a diary, whereas another was and first-hand accounts, and other ones were just as historical accounts, interviewing lots of different people, and written sort of third person. So you had different accounts. And here you have poetry a few times, lays, and then you have some actual proper prose a few times too, like the one that kicks it off. And that sort of a thing. So this sort of reminds me of that class, only it's in one book, and it's written by one author, if you will. So that's pretty cool. But it reads much more like an academic book than it does like an actual proper, novel or a collection of stories. Even though that's what it is, because of the additions by Christopher Tolkien, editing it, giving context, telling what's missing, what's been found, what fragments are he's including here. And from various things and that sort of a thing. So it reads much more like an academic paper that would be of great interest to Tolkien scholars, but less interested, I think, to general reading public. So I'm still glad that I read it, and I'm giving this just a general 7+ out of 10. It wasn't the epic that I was expecting, right? But it was still interesting. I still finished it, right? I didn't just read the first story and then set it down, right? I actually finished it over 4 days. Time. I knocked out 60 days on the first day on a Saturday. I knocked out 40 on Sunday and 40 on Monday because those are football days. And then I did 90 last night and finished this novel and knocked it out. So that was pretty good. I knocked it out in 4 days. So I did, and it doesn't take that much of your time. You can definitely knock this out pretty quickly, and you can definitely do this in bite chunks. Although there is one epic inclusion of one of the Lays of Lúthien that takes up a lot of this book. It's probably like 20% of this book. It's just one giant poem of an epic nature that you might have to divide. I divided it into days without realizing that it ended like 10 pages after I finished it. 40 pages on Monday. So I was like, oh, well, that's pretty... I could have just finished that on Monday. I could have stayed up. I find those to be quicker to read because they're just poetry. Here, I'll show you. Here's one of the lays, and as you can see, here's the art that's inside of it, and you can see it's just that much of the page. Right, it's not a full page. So I found it much quicker to read. I read his short stories at about 30 pages an hour, and I read but I read those at about 50 pages an hour. It was just a whole lot faster for me to knock out. So there you are. I'll go ahead and leave you to it. Have you read Beren and Lúthien, or have you? What did you think of it? Did you agree with my 7 out of 10? Did you think it's better or worse? What are your thoughts on it? Let's talk about spoilers. If you want to talk about the spoilers of this in the comments below, let's do that too. If you enjoyed this video, why not hit that subscribe button? There'll be a lot more of these to follow. And then I want to thank you so much for taking some time out of your day and investing it and watching my video. We all have so many things that are happening in our lives, and we're pulled in so many different directions. So the fact that you spent this time with me is incredibly humbling, and I appreciate it. So thanks again, and have an amazing day.